Hello and welcome to Worlds Apart. The latest skirmish on the Indian-Pakistani border has faded from the headlines for now, leaving the leaders on both sides with higher approval ratings than before. Will this political gratification, this spike in the polls after the exchange of fire, lead to more risk-taking when the next contention comes forth? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by P.S. Raghavan, former Indian ambassador to Russia and currently the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board. Ambassador, it's a great honor talking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Now, I'm sure you know how much Russia values its relationship with India. There is a consensus on that across party lines. Russians across all age groups have an overwhelmingly positive perception of your country, and yet what I see in Moscow these days is a genuine concern that India may have chosen to intentionally whip up its tensions with Pakistan for domestic political reasons. Is that concern valid?
You know, I'm very surprised that that is the perception that exists in Moscow. And I'm sure when you say that's a perception in Moscow, you mean among certain sections of the population in Russia, because our leaders understand each other very well. And now coming to this question of India whipping up tensions with Pakistan, you know, you are actually confusing effect with cause. One has to go back a little bit and examine why the situation with Pakistan became as it is today. On 14th of February, we need to go back to that date. On 14th of February, there was a gruesome terrorist attack on a security forces convoy in Kashmir. 40 security force members lost their lives. Now, this was the worst terrorist attack in Kashmir for quite some time. What happened? A terrorist organization of the name of Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is headquartered in Pakistan, and it is universally known that it is headquartered in Pakistan, immediately claimed credit for this gruesome attack. In fact, it did more than claiming credit. There was a video which was put out in Pakistan around that time showing the same suicide bomber talking about how he's going to do this and how he's going to achieve martyrdom.
I understand that this is a very painful case for the Indians, and I'm not intending to take it lightly, but as you just pointed out, it was a terrorist organization claiming the attack, not the Pakistani state claiming responsibility for that attack. Moreover, we know that similar suicide bombing attacks happened in Kashmir before. It is an extremely violent place, and it has been violent for decades. So the question is, why now? Why for the first time since 1971, India decided to respond to this kind of violence by launching strikes on sovereign Pakistani territory?
To start with, you can't say that suicide attacks have been taking place all the time since 1971, and this is the first time that India has chosen to respond. Firstly, as I pointed out, this was one of the worst attacks that has taken place in a long time. Secondly, you're talking about a terrorist organization based in Pakistan. Now, this terrorist organization has been known to be based in Pakistan for many years. The United Nations has dubbed it a global terrorist organization. A number of countries around the world have recognized the fact that this organization is functioning with the full knowledge of the government of Pakistan. Its leaders can be seen hobnobbing with the political leaders of Pakistan. To say that the sovereign state of Pakistan has no control over this organization is basically closing your eyes to reality. That's one of the points. Secondly, the number of terrorist attacks that have been taking place sourced to Pakistan has been increasing in recent years. And so any government which wants to protect its citizens has to take action. Now, what action did India take? Now, this also one should be clear about. When the Indian Air Force attacked a particular installation in Pakistan. It was not a military installation. It was not a civilian target. The government made its position quite clear. Its intelligence agencies had actually discovered that terrorist acts were being planned at this headquarters of this terrorist organization in the part of Pakistan which was attacked. And they had credible information that further terrorist attacks were being planned in various parts of the country. So what was done was basically an effort. What we called it was a preemptive non-military attack. Preemptive to prevent attacks from taking place in various parts of the country. Non-military because neither a military installation nor a civilian target was attacked.
But Ambassador, I'm sure you know very well that that Pakistan objects to that kind of policy, and moreover, it condemned in the strongest possible terms the suicide attack that happened in Kashmir. So again, let me ask you specifically, why is it the Indian policy to fully conflate the terrorist organization with the government of Pakistan?
Excuse me, let me give you a few examples. You know, you are now telling me that the Indian government is conflating a terrorist organization and the Pakistani state. Just look around you. Look, the day before this terrorist attack happened in Kashmir, there was an attack in Iran. A remarkably similar terrorist attack took place in Iran. 27 people lost their lives there. A major commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard accused Pakistan of fomenting terrorism and in fact told Pakistan that if you do not check terrorists from coming across your country, we'll come and do it for you. A couple of weeks later in Afghanistan, a suicide attack again. Again, another 26 or 27 people lost their lives. The Afghan Defense Ministry said that this was the work of the Taliban plus Jaish-e-Mohammed, the same terrorist organization that attacked in Kashmir. And they said this was masterminded by them. So why do you say that India is conflating the Pakistani government with terrorist organizations? All its neighbors are doing so.
I don't agree with that line of argumentation because neither Iran nor Afghanistan have launched strikes in response to the attacks perpetrated on their soil. And I'm sure you know that this is actually against international law. International law makes it obligatory upon countries that subscribe to it not to attack sovereign countries. You agree to that? Or do you believe that it is now the right of India to attack whatever country it blames for the terrorist attacks on its territory?
It's very nice to say that international law applies to one country and doesn't apply to another country. Now, you know, what you're doing really is you are equating the victim with the perpetrator of act. Now, see, I cannot accept the line that you're taking, that a terrorist organization functions on the territory of a state and that the government of the state does not know that it's functioning there. You know, every government has an obligation to not let its territory be used to attack other countries. So if you say that Pakistan did not know that this organization exists in this country when the leader of this organization is hobnobbing with all the political leaders of that country, nobody can believe that. And if you say that Pakistan knows it, then Pakistan is guilty of not curbing terrorism and of not letting its country being used for terrorist attacks against another country. So now, if you talk about India, therefore, countering the attack, look, you have to protect your country. You have to prevent terrorists from attacking your country. If you have the knowledge that there is a terrorist camp, if you see that this country in which the terrorist camp is located is doing nothing to prevent that camp from being used to attack another country, you have to act in self-defense. International law does permit you to act in self-defense. And this is a very unique situation. You have not faced a situation like this, and therefore, you know, it's easy for you to sit in the comfort of your country and to argue that my country cannot protect itself.
This is not fair. You know that Russia has suffered from terrorism more than perhaps any other country on the planet. So we know how difficult it is. And yet Russia does not launch bombing attacks on its neighbors, even when it knows that the threat is coming from their territory. Let me ask you, though, specifically, you said that since that terrorist organization is based on the Pakistan territory, it's fully the responsibility of that state. And I want to turn this question around and ask you directly, because we know that that particular attack was perpetrated by a local 22-year-old man who somehow was managed to able to source several hundred kilograms of explosives in the most militarized area in the world. There are 500,000 Indian soldiers stationed there, and yet none of them prevented him from driving around this car packed with explosives and detonating himself. If you say that Pakistan failed to control terrorism on its territory, didn't India essentially do the same? Didn't your security forces fail to protect your population from that kind of attacks?
No, you can talk about the security forces not being able to detect this particular act in time. Now, you know, actually, any counter-terrorism organization knows this fact, that there are constant attacks or attempts to attack by terrorists. You can stop 10 terrorist attacks. The one terrorist attack which somehow slips through, which it will slip through, you are condemned for. Nobody tells you that nobody praises you for stopping the 10 terrorist attacks that you did stop. So, don't blame the Indian security forces for not preventing the terrorist attack.
I'm not blaming anyone. I'm asking you the question about whether you guys should share responsibility for what's happening there. It's not fair. Why do you say that? Because you have a high security presence there. We have no stake in this conflict. We don't want any of you to fight.
Oh, yes, I agree with that. What I'm saying is that when the the act of terrorism is sponsored from across the border, it makes it even more difficult for your security forces to stop it. Now, you talked about 700 kilograms or whatever it is of explosive that this man had. It's a good question. Where did it come from? You know, we have problem with the infiltration across our borders. And this is a very well-known fact. By the way, this is internationally recognized. It's not something that only India is arguing about. You look at the number of statements that have been made in the UN. You look at the number of countries that have actually called upon Pakistan to curb acts of terrorism, even this time. Look at the number of statements that have come from foreign countries, specifically asking Pakistan to curb the terrorism that is coming from across its borders. So, you know, it's unfair to say that the act of the failure of the security forces to stop this one fellow from coming absolves Pakistan from all the activities that is doing in fomenting terrorism.
Well, Ambassador, we have to take a very short break now, but we will be back in just a few moments. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Worlds Apart with P.S. Raghavan, former Indian ambassador to Russia and currently the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board. Ambassador, I'm sure you know that the Pakistanis deny any state connection with the Pulwama attack, and they officially requested India to provide more evidence that the suicide bomber had a material connection to Pakistan. They promised to investigate whatever leads India may provide. How is New Delhi responding to that?
If you have been following the history of India-Pakistan relations, this is a very standard line. We actually had an occurrence not too far back in time when there was an attack on an Air Force base in India. We went through the same routine. Pakistan, in fact, said that, you give us evidence. We actually allowed a Pakistani team to come and see. Now, the point is, we have given evidence to a number of people. And if they go back and say, we have not found the evidence, what can you do? What is the evidence that you require to show that this particular organization is carrying out terrorist attacks
Well,
against
I will
India.
tell you, you need to prove the connection of this local man to that particular organization. You need to trace his movements. You need to find out how and where he was able to source those explosive materials. This is a very basic criminal work. This is what's called evidence, not ideological statements in defense of your country. We all defend our countries, but the specifics of the crime, do they need to be investigated?
Can I go back to something that I said earlier? This same gentleman was produced in a video in Pakistan before the event, saying that he is going to be carrying out this event and is going to become a martyr. Now, this is something that happened on the territory of Pakistan. It's a video produced on the territory of Pakistan. It is available. It can be seen. You see, when you talk about evidence, you have to first take the evidence that you have. You have to also take the evidence of the past.
What you're saying is that the fact that the Pakistanis did not act on the basis of that video is their blame, is their responsibility, but the fact that the Indian forces, who I suppose also monitor terrorist activity coming from Pakistan, failed to act on it, totally absolves them of responsibility.
You see, what you're saying is that the failure of the security forces to stop a terrorist act actually absolves the perpetrator of the terrorist act from any blame. I mean, I don't see that logic. What you're basically saying that if my security forces did not detect them and therefore the terrorist attack happened, there is no blame on the people who actually sent the terrorist across and who got him to perpetrate the act.
No, this is not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is that India needs to prove that this attack, if it blames it on Pakistan, it needs to prove that this particular perpetrator was connected to the state of Pakistan rather than a terrorist organization based in Pakistan, because you too have major issues controlling terrorist activity on your territory. And this is actually what Pakistanis are accusing you of, that the conduct of the counterterrorism operation in Kashmir is marginalizing and radicalizing many of those youngsters. That person, in particular, whom we are discussing, the 22-year-old, has a history of being detained and beaten by the Indian police. Do you think that is a problem? Because certainly this is something that Pakistan cannot control in the Indian-controlled Kashmir.
However, what Pakistan can do is to stop people, terrorists, from infiltrating across the border into India, right?
Well, it can do that in cooperation with the Indian forces, if there's goodwill on the other side.
You see, it's not happening. It's not, Indian forces are quite happy to...
If terrorism ends up hurting people both in the Pakistani-controlled territory and in the Indian-controlled territory, why is it so difficult to come together and to form some sort of a commission that will deal with that, rather than sending your military aircraft into somebody else's territory and bomb locations that don't even exist? I mean, I'm sure you know that the Pakistani media and the Pakistani authorities have been quite deft showcasing the military pointlessness of that strike. The strike didn't cause the harm that the Indians initially claimed. So it was a case of showmanship rather than military strategy.
I think you are taking a Pakistani case, accepting it unquestioningly, and you are now trying to make me answer to that. You're now telling me that it did not create the damage that it did. What is your evidence for saying that?
Well, a number of international media organizations have been on the ground.
Can you name one which has actually reached that place? The Pakistani authorities did not let them reach that place. So you're telling me that they're on the ground. But please verify your facts. None of them has actually reached that location because that location has been cordoned off.
I personally saw the video that was broadcast from that area. But even if you believe that my assertion of facts is wrong, I think the Indian authorities too have walked their claim of damage back. They are now saying that they never claimed to have killed 300,000 militants. They only say that their main point was to send a message rather than to kill any of the terrorists.
Yeah, anyway, the number is not 300,000.
300, I was wrong. Yes, I was wrong. 300, that was the initial claim.
Yeah, that's okay. That's just a normal error. No, I don't want to argue about the veracity of one satellite image or the other. As I mentioned to you, our point was we had evidence there was a terrorist camp there. And by the way, The fact that there is a terrorist camp there is something that we have conveyed to Pakistan in the past. This is not the first time. Nothing has happened. And, it's very simple. If you believe that there is going to be a terrorist attack from there, if you believe that that is what is happening, and if you believe that the state of Pakistan is not trying to prevent it, you will take action to prevent it. So you can't really, the highest duty of a government is to protect its own citizens. And that, I think, is the most important condition. So you believe that this is just a show of strength, it is a show of this. It's not that. And it's something that we have been through for the last many, many years, the kind of terrorism that we have faced against Pakistan. And listen, we are not, that's what I keep telling you, we are not the only people saying that. There is a vast number of members of the international community who are talking about Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism. We are quite happy to have dialogue with Pakistan. We are quite happy to resolve all issues with Pakistan without resorting to violence. But you cannot argue with a government when that same government is also killing your own people by sponsoring terrorism. It's as simple as that. You come from a country that knows terrorism. I know that very well. I have lived in Russia. I have heard President Putin talk in the strongest possible terms about how to deal with terrorists. So you know how to deal with terrorists. So let us also deal with terrorists in the same way.
Ambassador, again, the difference is there that Russia does not send its military jets into other country. Let me ask you specifically about the rationale for these strikes, because it is already clear that in political sense, Prime Minister Modi has benefited from those air raids. His approval ratings have soared after those strikes, and I'm sure you would agree with me that that is not a small thing ahead of a major elections which are coming in May. Do you think the timing of those strikes has any correlation whatsoever to the Indian political calendar?
So do you think that the terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir had any link with the Indian electoral calendar? Because what really started this was the terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir on 14th of February.
I don't put terrorists and the Indian government on the same level.
So you see, what I'm saying is that what happened between India and Pakistan really started from that terrorist attack that took place on the 14th of February. So, elections have nothing to do with it, in the sense that you will not stop taking action because elections are coming.
You may be more restrained, and at least up until recently, the Indian foreign policy has been categorized by strategic restraint. Are you saying that next time there is a terrorist attack in Kashmir, India should go ahead and bomb Pakistan again? Is that what you're saying? Is that what the Indian policy is right now?
It is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what happened this time also was that India did not attack Pakistan in retaliation for a terrorist strike. What did I say? I said evidence was available that there was a terrorist camp that was being used for planning terrorist attacks in different parts of the country. And what India did was to try to take out that terrorist camp so that it could protect its citizens. It did not target a military installation. It did not target Pakistani civilians. This is what I said. And therefore, if there is another terrorist attack, we have to see what the circumstances of that are and react accordingly. But look, no country is going to sit by idly, election or no election, while its own citizens are being killed, and it believes that those citizens are being killed by terrorists sponsored by, armed by, financed by a neighboring country. And by the way, we have to keep in mind other international evidence of Pakistani sponsorship of terrorism. I told you about the UN. There are these terrorist, by the way, this terrorist organization that struck in Kashmir and also struck allegedly in Afghanistan is designated as a global terrorist organization by the United Nations. The United Nations also has a financial action task force which monitors financial flows into terrorist organization. Again, it has put Pakistan on a watch list. It has accused Pakistan of not doing enough to stop the flow of funds into these terrorist organizations. So, the evidence is plenty. You can't just keep saying prove it. There is so much proof already existing. There's so much proof existing of both the terrorists in Pakistan, the government sponsorship of terrorists. I mean, just the other day, the Interior Minister of Pakistan made a statement on Pakistan TV saying that you guys can say what you like about these terrorist organizations. As long as we are there, these terrorist organizations are safe.
Ambassador, I could quote you a number of pretty belligerent statements by Prime Minister Modi in response to that attack, but unfortunately we are out of time. Anyway, I really, really appreciate you being on the show. It's been a great honor for me to talk to you. Thank you very much for participating in this rather heated, but I'm sure valuable debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, but I think you still need to read a lot more about what Pakistan is doing in the world around.
Well, Ambassador, I always try to rectify my ignorance, and that's why we have people like you on the show. Anyway, I encourage our viewers to keep this conversation going in our social media pages, and hope to see you again, same place, same time, here on Worlds Apart.